Welcome back. In this module we are going to be focusing specifically on social class. We started talking about social class in the previous module, but now we're going to go into a bit more in-depth discussion of exactly what social class is. We're going to kind of modernize some of the ideas about social class and define social class according to modern society. We're going to talk about some of the consequences or ramifications of social class, and we'll get into a little bit about some of the inequality in our society, as well as a discussion of poverty. So the first part, we should again just kind of rehash our discussion, like I said, that we started about with social class. So the best and most widely accepted definition of what social class is any large number of people who happen to rank closely together in relationship to, again, what we call the three P's. So we're going to break those down a little bit here. When we talk about property, we're also talking about wealth, which once again is going to lead us to a discussion a little bit later in this module about wealth inequality. But when we talk about property, we're basically talking about material possessions. So anything that has a value. So we often think about it just in terms of money, and specifically the money that's coming toward us, which we generally call income. But basically anything that has a value in society can be traded or sold that has a material value is considered property. So things like buildings, land, machinery, businesses, stocks, bonds, even personal possessions like vehicles, jewelry, art, all these things all together are a measure of property or wealth. So again, different than income. Income is money that is basically flowing toward you. For most of us in society, that is our income. But of course, there's many other types of income, or it's our salary or wage. But for many types of people, income can be dividends or returns on investments. Could be if you own a building and have renters, obviously the money you collect from that would be considered income. If you are collecting benefits or receive child support, that would be considered income. If you go to a casino and gamble and win, that's income. So that's just money flowing toward you. But that is different than, again, the total amount of wealth or property. There are plenty of people who have lots and lots of wealth and don't necessarily have an income. That we would consider traditional in terms of, like I said, salary or wages. And we're going to be talking a little bit, there is a video that I posted in the D2L shell about wealth inequality in the United States. Basically, we could say approximately 75% of the total amount of wealth in the nation, and there are different standards. The video you watch estimates the total wealth of the United States is about 54 trillion. Again, different estimates depending on who you're speaking to. It's around that area. But basically 75% of almost the entire wealth of the country is owned by about 10% of the population. So we know that wealth is not spread evenly throughout our society. But once again, as soon as you view that video, I think there'll be a certain amount of realization about the extent of how unequal the distribution of wealth is in our society. The second thing that we can look at is power. Power simply being the ability to have other people do what you want them to do. Again, sometimes a bit of a difficult thing to quantify as far as being able to study it. However, the sociologist C. Wright Mills in the 1950s and 60s talked quite a bit about power in our society, and whereas we can sometimes, again, envision society as being kind of this traditional pyramidal scheme where when we talk about class, and often we talk about property, we definitely recognize that we can divide society more or less up into upper, middle, and lower classes. And again, the use of the pyramid reflects population. So we're saying that the upper classes are the smallest, middle classes are larger, and lower classes would be the largest group within society. And we typically think about this in terms of money or power or wealth. But Mills spoke of basically this pyramid scheme existing also in power. So as the wealth in society was being concentrated toward the top, Mills was also talking about the fact that power, or the ability for some groups to exert authority over other people, was also becoming concentrated in this very way. And he predicted the existence of what he called a power elite, that those people, a group in society who had so much power that they could basically do almost whatever they wanted to do with very little resistance that could be mounted by the rest of society, and that this power was becoming concentrated, much as we talk about with wealth, in a very small group of people at the top of society, which again he termed the power elite. As recently as 2006, 2010, a researcher by the name of William Domhoff actually followed up quite a bit on this, and also stated that when we think of power in our society, we usually, if I ask, where does the power reside in our society, at the top of society, we often point to government, and we can say that the U.S. government is the ultimate source of power in our society as far as being able to do things. What Mills predicted and Domhoff substantiated is that even at a level above government in our society, there is and does exist a group of people in whom power is so concentrated that the federal government actually does not make decisions without gaining the consensus or approval of that very small group of people. So much as property is concentrated at the top of our society, Mills and Domhoff also say that power has become concentrated into a very small group of people at the very top of society. The third P that we could discuss here is prestige. Prestige is a measure of respect or regard. We generally associate this in our society with occupation. So we usually say that there are high prestige jobs or high prestige careers in our society. And once again, while it may seem that it may be difficult to quantify this, if we were to take a large list of all the occupations in the society and give it to a significant representation of people in the society and ask them to rank them or assign them numerical values according to how much respect or regard they give them, then that large sample, or that respective sample, would give us a pretty good idea about how the society at large gives prestige to people based on their occupations or careers. So no surprise that if we take a list of, let's say, 100 different occupations, at the top we definitely see things like doctors and lawyers and college professors and astronauts and politicians. And when we think about those jobs, we usually agree that those are usually pretty prestigious. When we get down to what we might consider the middle, if we were ranking these on the scales of 1 to 100, some of those high occupation jobs would receive scores in the 80s and 90s. If we were talking about the jobs that might appear in the middle, let's say the 40s and 50s, we might be talking about school teachers, people who work in various management positions and clerks, and people who perform other types of service jobs, those kind of things. And then when we get to the very bottom, maybe 20s and lower, we're definitely talking about occupations such as waiters and waitresses, bartenders, janitors, assembly line workers, those kind of things. So we wonder then, okay, how or what are some of the criteria for people to give respect to different positions? And some of the things that we can definitely say is some of the characteristics of what we would consider to be high prestige or low prestige jobs. High prestige jobs are clearly those in which the people who are associated with those things are generally being paid more. So we definitely know that there's a relationship between property and prestige. So occupations which are considered to be higher paying are generally considered more prestigious. The level of education required usually factors in. So again, some of those jobs that I mentioned at the very beginning, doctors and lawyers and college professors and astronauts, these are all jobs which typically require a high degree of education, where if you look at the lower end of the scale, We see much more physical labor and less education necessary. The physical labor actually comes into that as well. When we see jobs ranked as being more prestigious in our society, we usually see that those are the jobs that require more abstract thought. So people are basically working with their minds as opposed to their hands or their backs, which more physical labor is associated with lower prestige jobs. And then the final criteria we often see is the level of supervision or autonomy that people have in their jobs. High prestige jobs are considered to be generally very autonomous. People are free to schedule their time, to come up with lists of priorities for how they're going to spend their days. Again, a lot of problem solving, abstract thought. So if you think about doctors and lawyers, while there's certainly structure to those jobs, those people are very much free to, those occupations certainly allow them a lot of freedom to decide how they're going to get their work done. Whereas if you look at, again, low prestige occupations, much more rigid in the rules that apply, not a lot of room for independent thought, and a lot of very close supervision associated with those jobs. So when we look at all three of these together, property, power, and prestige, we can see that it's the varying degrees to which individuals possess these that's going to determine to a large degree what kind of social class that those people belong to.